Prince Andrew was the golden child, born into a life of unimaginable privilege as the first child of a reigning monarch in over a century. Andrew was athletic, charming, and the quote-unquote action man of the family business. From the cockpits of Sea King helicopters in the Falklands to exclusive VIP lounges of London's Mayfair, he didn't just live the royal dream, he flaunted it. But behind the medals and the Randy Andy playboy persona lay a web of sinister connections that would eventually bring the entire House of York to its knees. A web spun by a billionaire financer and a high society fixer that transformed the prince of the realm into a global pariah. For years, he thought he was untouchable. He thought a royal title and a team of lawyers could silence the echoes of a New York townhouse and a private island. With new files alleging the betrayal of state secrets and a family legacy in ruins, the question isn't just how did this happen, it's who is the man behind the medals and how deep does this rot really go.
Do you think that Prince Andrew will ever be held accountable?
I'm going to try my damnedest.
But first, if you didn't know, I make weekly documentary videos here on this channel, and it would be awesome if you could drop a sub to the channel so we can keep this YouTube dream alive. My videos are also up on Spotify, so if you want to watch and listen to my videos on the go, feel free to check that out in the description. But without further ado, let's get back into the video. Born in 1960, Andrew was the first child born to a reigning monarch in 103 years. So straight off the bat, or birth I should say, the guy already had a pompous aura around him, even more so than her two previous children. The Queen was also already 8 years into her reign, and was more settled into her role as head of state, which subsequently meant that she could spend more time with him than she had with Charles or Anne. This essentially made him the golden child, and allegedly the Queen's favourite, which many people believe contributed to a lifelong sense of entitlement and loving the smell of his own farts. During these early years, he was described by royal historians as boisterous, confident, and somewhat mischievous. Unlike the more sensitive and introspective Charles, Andrew was thick-skinned and extroverted. As a teenager during the 70s, Andrew attended Ghislane in Scotland, which was basically like a really strict boarding school that both his dad, Prince Philip, and his older brother Charles attended. If you've ever seen season 2 of The Crown on Netflix, you'll know that when Charles went to the school, he described it as absolute hell due to the relentless bullying and discipline he endured. Andrew, on the other hand, absolutely thrived at the school. He was athletic, popular, and even became head boy. During his time here, he was also given a couple of nicknames. He was given the name, hold on, I've got to get this right, the Snigger for his apparent fondness for off-colour jokes, and the name Randy Andy due to his frequent romantic interests and quote, playboy reputation. If that isn't a little bit of foreshadowing, I don't know what is. On the academic front, he was a bit shit, but he still managed to leave school with 3 A-levels in English, history, and economics, but chose not to attend university, and instead joined the Royal Navy, a move that was both kind of traditional and a strategic choice. Part of this was continuing the legacy of his dad, Prince Phil, and his granddad, George VI. It was a tried and tested route to prove your worth, and from Andrew's perspective, he was highly motivated to build an identity away from just being a royal hanger-oner, or a bit of a lingerer, as he was essentially the spare child who lacked a defined role within the family business. He wouldn't ever inherit the crown, thank God. He wouldn't have any role in the UK government, he was essentially a backup. His entire purpose since birth is to be the bloke who stands in if anything happens to his older brother before he's had children of his own. So essentially, Andrew was desperate to get out of Charles's shadow and wanted to lean into the action man image he would be portrayed as if he went into the Navy. So in 1979, he entered the Royal Navy College at the age of 19 for pilot training, after which he was accepted as a trainee helicopter pilot. From there, he would also complete the Royal Marines All-Arms Commando course, which earned him the right to wear a green beret. After graduating from the college in Dartmouth, Andrew had training with the Royal Air Force and basic flying training with the Navy, where he learned to fly a Gazelle helicopter. After being awarded his wings, he then progressed to advanced training and did operational flying training. That was until 1982 and the start of the Falklands War. As a sub-lieutenant and co-pilot of a Sea King helicopter aboard the aircraft carrier HMS Invincible, he was thrust into action at the age of 22. On the 5th of April, Andrew would set sail for the South Atlantic, where he would remain for the entire 74 days of the conflict. One of his most notable and debated tasks during the war was flying his helicopter as a missile decoy, with the goal to hover near the fleet to confuse the radar of incoming missiles and draw them away from the aircraft carriers. Essentially, be a bit of a honey trap in some regards. In 2002, on the 20th anniversary of the end of the Falklands War, Andrew was interviewed about his experience of the conflict.
We picked up my luggage, said goodbye to the Queen, who was out riding, and I just said, we've been sailed and I've got to go. She said, well, call us when you're coming back, and set off for Portsmouth. All we were told to do was that if we saw a missile coming towards us, then we were to climb and let it go underneath us. I remember looking out over my right side going, I'm not going to say anything about this, but I can see that coming towards me because I don't want to worry them. I suppose that was the one moment when I've got my lifetime's worth of adrenaline rush there. It gave me a nasty little white fleck in the side of which only when I cut my hair can you see it. That's the ship's positions. From the 3rd to the 9th of May, there's the Falklands and there's Argentina. The only way I could describe it is that if you've perhaps made a rather more risky overtake in a car than you would sometimes wish, and you get that sort of hot flush, well, double that, add 10, and then do it again. That's how hot and sweaty it became inside my immersion suit at that particular moment.
You must have thought at some moments, God, I wonder if I'm actually going to come back from this. Did that thought cross your mind?
I suppose it did every now and again, but not whilst I was actually doing the work. But I just got on with it. It was just the fact that, well, if your number's up, then your number's up. I was cannon fodder, basically, and there was no way that I did not give an instruction to anybody. I was purely there to be instructed and to get on with it, and that was my job.
As you can tell, the bloke really struggled to talk about how brave he was during his time fighting for Mummy, and he somehow had an excellent and detailed recall for somebody who had such a bad memory.
When we saw the pall of smoke, we then realised what was going on, and so therefore we knew that at that stage that the real war had started. And then we saw aircraft flying over us, and then we realised that we were there in case somebody had a problem and we were going to pick them up.
You just talk me through a little bit about, obviously, the war lasted quite a long time. You were on threat. You were certainly extremely threatened when you were on Invincible, when you were up in the air, the conditions in Invincible. Apologies, when you were in Invincible. You were very seriously under threat. The conditions up in the sky were pretty atrocious. The flying, I'm told, was very, very difficult. Can you just talk me through what it was like?
I don't know whether it was that difficult. I mean, it was. We were crewed up right from the word go. So we had a crew that we were trained. We trained together. The flying was 9 times out of 10 clear blue sky. It was quite windy, but in that part of the world, there's no pollution, so therefore the air is very clear. So you're constantly getting sort of gales going through. They're going much faster than they are here. So you get changes in wind very, very quickly. It goes up to 30, 35 knots, and then goes right down to nothing, and then goes up again. So that the rate of change is much higher than it is here. There's a continuous sort of gentle blow here. So there are differences in the way that the weather pattern works. But it was there was nothing particularly odd about it, and there was nothing particularly dingy. I don't think I remember doing it. I mean, there was very little fog, for instance. I mean, it was just straightforward windy, ship moving. It's quite fun trying to get back to a ship when it's moving, but you get used to it after a while. That's why I joined the Navy. It was the challenge of deck landing.
In September 1982, Andrew returned to Portsmouth to a hero's welcome, which I imagine must have done his ego a world of favours. He later stated that coming back from war, I put away childish things and false bravado, and returned a man in full knowledge of human frailty and suffering. After the war, he continued his naval career for another 18 years, where during that time, he was eventually promoted to commander and served as captain of the mine hunter HMS Cottesmore. It was also during these years after the Falklands where Andrew had first come in contact with his long-term friend Ghislaine Maxwell. She also came from an extremely well-connected family, with her father Robert being an MP and owning the Daily Mirror newspaper. He first met the socialite in the mid-80s while she was studying at Oxford University, and he was of course in the Navy. It was also during this time where Andrew would go on to meet his future wife, Sarah Ferguson. The two were childhood acquaintances, but were ultimately set up by Fergie's mate, Princess Diana, who seated Sarah next to Andrew at lunch during the Royal Ascot races. The two immediately hit it off, and within 9 months they were engaged, after securing his mum's consent of course. The pair got married at Westminster Abbey on the 23rd of July 1986.
My fingers. Ow!
Kiss me then.
Why do you want me to kiss
Go on,
you?
hurry up.
Why?
Hurry up! Start filming, quick. Go on, dare you.
You're a monster.
However, due to Andrew's career in the Navy, the couple only saw each other for about 40 days a year, which led to an intense loneliness and isolation for Sarah. Not only that, Sarah was the target for British tabloids who compared her to Diana and mocked her for her weight and fashion choices, writing headlines like "The Duchess of Paul." This led to Sarah and Andrew separating in 1992. However, the final nail in the coffin for the relationship came shortly after, when tabloids published photos of Sarah sunbathing topless in France while her financial advisor sucked her toes. This was of course deeply embarrassing for the royal family and made reconciliation basically impossible. But saying that, Sarah didn't necessarily want a divorce, as she just wanted freedom to work, but the royal protocol at the time didn't really want a working princess to have commercial interests. So they officially divorced in 1996, so Sarah could pursue her own career. Sarah received a settlement from the Queen of £500,000 for a house, £1.4 million for her daughter's trust funds, and an annual 15 grand annual allowance. This payout was much needed for Sarah, as since the separation she had accumulated a lot of debt to try and keep up with her lifestyle and had a number of failing businesses. At the time of the divorce, people were reporting that she owed over $4 million. Despite all of this drama, the two remained incredibly close to co-parent their daughters, Beatrice and Eugene, even staying together at the Royal Lodge in Windsor for decades, and, of course, continued to share the same social circle. So, after the divorce in November 1996, she released her autobiography to cash in on the drama, and on the promotional tour for the book, Sarah implied that she basically had an open relationship with Andrew and talked about her experience after the divorce.
Into the dark, I thought if I sleep with my eyes open, I can see any spooks coming towards me. And yet, I realised that, in fact, the fear of the dark was the fear of the demons inside myself, and all the treacle and the black treacle, all the fears and anxieties I had to come to terms with inside myself.
3 years later, in 1999, is when all of this information I've just explained begins to make logical sense in how the Yorks became intertwined with the web of Epstein. You see, after the divorce, Andrew and Ghislaine were hitting the town on the New York and London social scene on a regular basis. And as you can see from some of these photos, it looked like he was off his fucking nut. They were getting widely covered in the press, and Andy was getting dubbed the party prince by tabloids. Mayfair clubs like Annabelle's, The Tramp and China White were the epicenter of the cool London social scene, and thus Andrew's stomping grounds. While some reports suggest that Epstein and Andrew met in the early 90s, Andy claims that he met Epstein in 1999 through Ghislaine.
How did you first become friends? How did you meet?
Well, I met through his girlfriend back in 1999, and I'd known her since she was at university in the UK. And it would be, to some extent, a stretch to say that as it were, we were close friends. I mean, we were friends because of other people.
Maxwell essentially vouched for Epstein within the British aristocracy, and that soon meant that he was being hosted at royal residencies for things like Princess Beatrice's birthday party. The first documented flight Andrew took on Epstein's private jet came in February 1999, where he flew from the US Virgin Islands to Florida. Despite Andrew denying Virginia's claims of him visiting the island in this peak socialite era, flight logs show Andrew flying on Epstein's jet at least 4 different times. It was also at this time in 1999 where a 15-year-old Virginia Roberts was coerced by Ghislaine at Mar-A-Lago in Florida to go to Epstein's mansion to learn how to perform massages. A few days after first meeting Virginia, they promised her the world, promising trips on Epstein's private jet and having a well-paid profession. Throughout 1999 and 2000, Andrew and Epstein and Ghislaine were like 3 pedos in a pod. In June, they attended a party at Windsor and then attended the Royal Ascot the following day. A few months later in September, Andrew and Maxwell were pictured at the wedding of Andy's former girlfriend, Aurelia Cecil, and then went on a trip to Thailand together in January 2001.
He was your guest as well. In 2000, Epstein was a guest at Windsor Castle and at Sandringham. He was brought right into the heart of the royal family at your invitation.
But certainly at my invitation, not at the royal family's invitation. But remember that it was his girlfriend that was the key element in this. He was the, as it were, +1 to some extent in that aspect.
Am I right in thinking you threw a birthday party for Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, at Sandringham?
No, it was a shooting weekend.
A shooting weekend?
Just a straightforward shooting weekend.
But during these times that he was a guest at Windsor Castle, at Sandringham, the shooting weekend, we now know that he was and had been procuring young girls for sex trafficking.
We now know that. At the time, there was no indication to me or anybody else that that was what he was doing.
On March 10th, 2001, according to Virginia Giuffre's memoir, she recalled waking up at Ghislaine's house in London and was told it was going to be a special day, and just like Cinderella, she was going to meet a handsome prince. That evening, Andrew arrived at Ghislaine's townhouse where he guessed her age. Bear in mind, she was 17 at the time. The group went to Tramp nightclub in Mayfair, where Virginia specifically remembers Andrew sweating profusely on the dance floor, despite him not being able to sweat and being in a Pizza Express in Woking.
She described dancing with you and you profusely sweating, and that she went on to have bath, possibly.
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was, yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at, and I simply, it was almost impossible for me to sweat. And it's only because I have done a number of things in the recent past that I'm starting to be able to do that again. So I'm afraid to say that there's a medical condition that says that I didn't do it, so therefore.
Do you remember dancing at Tramp?
No. That couldn't have happened because the date that is being suggested, I was at home with the children.
You know that you were at home with the children. Was it a memorable night?
On that particular day that we now understand is the date, which is the 10th of March, I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and then because the Duchess was away, we have a simple rule in the family that when one's away, the other one's there. I was on terminal leave at the time from the Royal Navy, so therefore I was at home.
After returning from the club, the iconic photo of Andrew with his arm around the waist of Virginia was taken. After that photo was taken, Virginia claims that Maxwell told her that she had to do to Andrew what she did for Jeffrey. They then went upstairs to a bathroom and then a bedroom. In subsequent legal findings, she claimed that she was paid $15,000 for the encounter.
Do you remember meeting her at all?
No.
Do you know you didn't meet her? Or do you just not remember meeting her?
No, I don't know if I've met her, but no, I have no recollection of meeting her.
Around this same time in early 2001, one of Epstein's offshore entities allegedly wired $150,000 to a private account controlled by Sarah Ferguson, which was apparently to help stabilise her business interests. Fergie claimed that these funds were for share options that she had earned for being an ambassador for Weight Watchers, which had gone public earlier that year. But this part right here is where people believe this is how Epstein created an alleged debt trap and financial dependency. By solving Fergie's cash flow crisis, he ensured that Andrew remained accessible. After retiring from a 22-year career in the Royal Navy, Andrew began an unpaid role of being a trade envoy, which basically means he just travels around the world trying to promote British business interests and foreign investment. Despite being an unpaid role, he was given the name Air Miles Andy due to the frequency and high cost of his taxpayer-funded travel. While Virginia was off in Australia starting a new life and marrying her husband Robert in 2002, Andrew was settling into his role as a globe-trotting trade envoy, racking up those air miles. But the connection to Epstein didn't just vanish. In 2006, despite Epstein already being under the microscope of Florida police for his activities at Palm Beach, he and Ghislaine Maxwell were invited guests of the Prince at the Royal Lodge in Windsor. This showed that even as the walls were caving in on Epstein's quote-unquote massage business in the States, Andrew was still keeping the door wide open. In 2008, Epstein was arrested and sentenced to 13 months in prison with a custody with work release, which basically means he was allowed to be outside the prison for up to 16 hours a day. But the newly released Epstein documents suggest that Fergie and Andy, who continued to live together after their divorce, separately continued to meet with Epstein after his first conviction. On the 14th of June 2009, less than a week before Epstein was meant to be released from prison for his first sentence for SA convictions, Sarah emailed him asking for help with her business, Mother's Army, which is apparently designed to help amplify the voices of mothers all around the world. Epstein replied with, "You need 5 powerful women who will not get jealous of your success." Sarah then went off to list, "I could get Joan Branson, Janine Geldof's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, Liz Murdoch, Ali, Bono's wife, just for kickoffs." In July, an email from one of Epstein's aides confirmed the flight details for the Duchess and her daughters to fly from Heathrow to Miami to come stay at Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. When they flew there later in the month, they reportedly stayed for 5 days and had their 15 grand flights paid for. This whole trip was basically framed as a business trip to discuss her company Mother's Army, which in the files revealed that Epstein held a 51% majority stake. Shortly after returning to the UK, Fergie wrote to him regarding a lunch they had with her daughters. "In just 1 week after your lunch, it seems the energy has lifted. I have never been more touched by a friend's kindness than your compliment to me in front of my girls. Thank you, Jeffrey, for being the brother I've always wished for." A month later in September, Sarah sent another email to the brother she always wished for by stating, "You are a legend. I really don't have the words to describe my love, gratitude for your generosity and kindness. I'm at your service, just marry me." Another month later in October 2009, Epstein allegedly emailed Sarah informing her that there may be a rat leaking news of her money troubles to the press. The same day, she replied stating, "ABC and all this is being handled by my lawyer. I urgently need £20,000 for rent today. The landlord has threatened to get the newspapers if I don't pay. Any brainwaves? It is getting more and more close. Arg." In February 2010, Sarah was pulling the strings to get Epstein into the upper echelons of the royal house by inviting him for tea and to celebrate Andrew's 50th birthday via Sarah's assistant Amanda Thirsk. "Beatrice, Eugene and I would love to invite you to celebrate 50 years of Papa/Andrew. It will be suits and cocktail dresses, and you know me, mysterious mischief. So bring your presence, your humour." In May of the same year, Fergie would go through arguably one of her biggest scandals. While in New York, she met with an undercover News of the World reporter posing as a wealthy Indian businessman. This so-called businessman was seeking high-level introductions to facilitate major business deals. Basically, he was looking to do a cash for access deal and was targeting Andrew specifically because he was the UK's special representative for international trade and investment. However, as we all know, this was a trap. A few weeks later, she met with the businessman in Mayfair, London for a second meeting. She requested £500,000 to provide access to Andrew and receive a down payment of $40,000. Unfortunately for her, this entire meeting was being secretly filmed.
The next thing. £500,000 when you can to me. Open doors.
Me, Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
Is that a deal?
Yeah.
In 2016, Fergie actually launched a $25 million legal claim against the news group newspapers for invasion of privacy, deceit, and basically ruining her career. The case is still ongoing, given what else is being released at the moment. However, in June 2010, just a few months after the scandal, she was interviewed by Oprah Winfrey and explained her reasoning for accepting the money.
I haven't faced the devil in the face because I was in the gutter at that moment. I know exactly, I'm very aware of the fact that I'd been drinking, you know, that I was not in my right place.
After the scandal, Sarah wrote to Epstein claiming that she was basically another woman who left the royal family without a head. "As I predicted many months ago, the British press is ready to exterminate me, and it seems that PricewaterhouseCoopers and the palace system are not equipped to deal with all of this huge wave of negativity. Therefore, I have to return to the UK and be exterminated and face the thunderous music. I'm now 1000% being hung out to dry. Just as I predicted, you will see. The press will have me exiled. I'm totally on my own now. This is beyond scandalous and nobody can do anything. Just as I always said, no woman has ever left the royal family with her head, and they cannot behead me, therefore will discredit me." In November 2010, Fergie had a number of debts. She apparently owed her former assistant, John O'Sullivan, 80 grand in unpaid wages and cash loans. She was apparently trying to restructure those debts through a creditor agreement in which everyone would accept less than they were owed. But because John's consent was apparently essential, discussions followed about arranging the transfer of a lump sum to him through Epstein so Fergie could avoid bankruptcy. At this time, Epstein then emailed David Stern, who was an aide to Prince Andrew, stating, "She called me yesterday, Johnny, blah blah." Because Epstein had been released from prison less than a year ago, he was under intense media scrutiny. And amazingly, Andrew decided it would be a good idea to go on a private visit and stay at his New York townhouse for several days. On the 5th of December, Epstein and Andrew were seen walking through Central Park, which is where a journalist who was staking out his house notified British photographer Jay Donnelly, which is how he managed to capture the iconic photo of the pair of them together. Although the 2001 Virginia photo with Andrew suggests a historical connection, this photo was the proof that Andrew maintained their friendship even when Epstein's criminal status was on public record.
But with all the attendant scrutiny on me, then I don't think it is a wise thing to do.
Who advised you then that it was a good idea to go and break up the friendship? Did that come from the palace? Was Her Majesty the Queen involved?
No. That came from, so there were a number of people so some people from my staff, some people from friends and family I was talking to, and I took the decision that I had to show leadership and I had to go and see him and I had to tell him that's it.
Because during that time, those few days, witnesses say they saw many young girls coming and going at the time. There is video footage of Epstein accompanied by young girls, and you were there staying in his house, catching up with friends.
I mean, if they were, then I wasn't a party to any of that. I never saw them. I mean, you have to understand that his house, I described it more almost as a railway station, if you know what I mean, in the sense that there were people coming in and out of that house all the time. What they were doing and why they were there, I had nothing to do with. So I'm afraid I can't make any comment on that because I really don't know.
In newly released files, it's also suggested in this same New York trip that Andrew attended a quote, fun fast dinner hosted at the townhouse.
Oh, in 2010? That certainly wasn't a party to celebrate his release in December, because it was a small dinner party. There were only 8 or 10 of us, I think, at the dinner. If there was a party, then I'd know nothing about that.
You were invited to that dinner as a guest of honour.
Well, I was there, so there was a dinner. I don't think it was quite as you might put it, but yeah, okay, I was there at a dinner. Yeah.
Other newly released files revealed that even after the breakup walk, both Fergie and Andrew continued to email Epstein. In January 2011, 11 days after an email that seemed to suggest that Epstein agreed to pay 25 grand to Sarah's ex-assistant, she wrote to Jeff in another email chain, "My dear friend Jeffrey, how can I thank you enough? You have my heart, your friend always." However, the following month in February, Sarah's former assistant had tried to reach out for help through Amanda Thirsk, Andrew's assistant, stating, "Is there anything you, the Duke or the Duchess can do to speed things along? Thanks and best wishes, Johnny." This email then apparently got forwarded to Epstein from Fergie, writing, "I'm embarrassed and sorry to ask you, as it's such a favour. What shall we do?" To which Epstein responded with, "I need to speak to Andrew, don't worry." On the 20th of February, the photo of Andrew and Epstein in Central Park was published for the first time by the News of the World with the headline, "Prince Andy and the Pedo." In March 2011, during an interview, Fergie publicly distanced herself from Epstein to address the scandal of Epstein paying off her debt and her ex-husband meeting him in New York, basically condemning his actions. However, after Epstein caught wind of Fergie using the pedo word in her interview, he was extremely pissed off and believed it was a major betrayal of their business arrangement. This led him to initiate contact with Sarah's then spokesperson, James Henderson. James recalled receiving a menacing phone call from Epstein that he described being like Hannibal Lecter, cold, calm and whispering. The message was him explicitly threatening to destroy the York family, specifically telling Henderson that he would bury Fergie in legal fees that would essentially end her and release sensitive information that would ruin Andrew's career as a trade envoy, which, spoiler alert, it did. However, shortly after this phone call, in April, she emailed Epstein to apologise, stating, "I know you also feel hellishly let down by me from what you were either told or read, and I must humbly apologise to you and your heart for that. You have always been a steadfast, generous and supreme friend to me and my family. As you know, I absolutely did not say the P word about you, but I understand if it was reported that I did." Her spokesperson kind of just reiterated that Fergie regretted her association with the bloke and that she was under legal duress. In August 2011, Epstein sent an email to an address only identified as Ferg, in which he writes, "When you first got in trouble, you said to me, Jeffrey, I know that as I told everyone, you're either on the team or off. I knew you're always on my team. That was right." The unidentified responder replied to that email email, "I'm on yours and you on mine, with great love and strength." A month later in September, another exchange with a sender named Sarah congratulated Epstein for having a baby, but later went on to explain how they felt a bit betrayed. "You have disappeared. I did not even know you were having a baby. It was so crystal clear to me that you were only friends with me to get to Andrew." All of that information I just explained partly became available thanks to Virginia Giuffre coming forward for media interviews in 2011. She became one of the first people to identify herself as one of Epstein's victims, and during an FBI interview, she named Prince Andrew alongside him. This is when that photo of Andrew with his arm around teenage Virginia in Maxwell's London home really started to haunt the palace. While the Yorks were busy trying to ignore the photo, Virginia was filing defamation lawsuits against Ghislaine Maxwell, which eventually led to a massive unsealing of documents that dragged the prince's name back into the muck. On the 6th of July 2019, Epstein was federally arrested and then died in prison a month later in August. This resulted in Prince Andrew facing the music and agreed to be interviewed by the BBC's Newsnight to discuss his involvement in Epstein. The interview took place on the 17th of November, and as you've seen throughout this video, completely destroyed what little reputation he had. He claimed he couldn't have been sweating in a nightclub because of a medical condition that was caused by an adrenaline overdose during the Falklands War, and even tried to use a trip to a Pizza Express in Woking as a rock-solid alibi. Instead of sympathy, he got memes. And the fallout was immediate, with him being forced to step back from public duties. In 2020, the net finally closed on Ghislaine Maxwell. With his fixer behind bars, Andrew was more exposed than ever. In August 2021, Virginia Giuffre officially filed a civil lawsuit against him in New York, accusing him of sexual assault. For months, the prince's legal team tried every trick in the book to get it thrown out, but the judge wasn't having it. By early 2022, the pressure was unbearable. To avoid a public trial that would have been a disaster for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, Andrew reached an out-of-court settlement with Virginia and made a statement acknowledging her suffering. Now, with information emerging left, right and centre, some sources estimate that the settlement was in the region of £12 million and that large sections of this payment came from his family, with the Sun reporting, take this source of a pinch of salt, that the Queen provided up to £7 million and another £3 million coming from Prince Philip's estate a year after his death, and another £1.5 million coming from his brother, Charles. However, because there's been no full disclosure yet to prove that the public's money wasn't involved, it's becoming increasingly questioned by taxpayers. Before the settlement was even dry, the palace stripped him of his military titles and his title of His Royal Highness. Andrew was effectively sacked from the family business. Throughout 2023 and 2024, more court documents were unsealed, detailing even more associations and allegations. These files painted a picture of a royal who was deeply embedded in Epstein's network, long after he should have known better. During this time, Virginia continued her advocacy work for survivors.
I was recruited at a very young age from Mar-A-Lago and entrapped in a world that I didn't understand, and I've been fighting that very world to this day.
However, on April 25, 2025, Virginia sadly died via an alleged suicide. After her death, her family revealed that Virginia wrote a final letter, stating, "Mothers, fathers, sisters and brothers need to show the battle lines are drawn and stand together to fight for the future of victims. Is protesting the answer? I don't know, but we've got to start somewhere." In October 2025, Virginia's memoir, called Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice, was released after her death. In the memoir, Virginia alleged that she had intercourse with Prince Andrew on 3 separate occasions, with the third time being on Epstein's island that she referred to as an orgy. She continues, stating, "Epstein, Andy and approximately 8 other young girls and I had sex together. The other girls all appeared to be under the age of 18 and didn't really speak English." Epstein laughed about how they couldn't really communicate, saying they're the easiest girls to get along with. Later on in the book, she goes on to recall how she felt seeing the photo of Epstein walking with Andrew in Central Park. "I was of course revolted to see 2 of my abusers together, out for a stroll, but mostly I was amazed that a member of the royal family would be stupid enough to appear in public with Epstein." In October 2025, a clip resurrected from an interview with an ex-member of Buckingham Palace's security, Paul Page, shared his experience of dealing with the prince.
She thought it was a bit of a boy, and the joke was he should have a revolving door in his bedroom. You know, it was that sort of attitude. I mean, he would get his protection officers to drive some of these females home. And to be quite honest with you, last time I looked, Royal Protection Command isn't the taxi service, so he misused police resources for his own ends. But obviously, protection officers aren't going to say no. They're going to do what they're told, because you're now in an environment, you're part of the royal household. You're not part of the Metropolitan Police anymore. You're now in that bubble, and your loyalty is to the royal family. And that is how it's perceived.
By 2026, it turns out that phone call threat that Fergie's assistant received from Epstein in 2011 really did set a catalyst of destroying the York family. At the time, Andrew was working as a trade envoy for the UK. However, these newly released Epstein files released in February 2026 allege that Andrew may have been sharing confidential trade documents with Epstein. So that is apparently what has led him to be ultimately questioned by police and released under investigation. Funnily enough, the arrest took place on his 66th birthday and was questioned for approximately 10 hours. But more importantly, the photo of him leaning back in the Range Rover became heavily memed upon and was even hung up in the loo. On the same day of his questioning, his older brother released a statement regarding the situation. "I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew and suspension of misconduct in public office. What now follows is the full, fair and proper process by which the issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course." On the same day, Andrew's ex-girlfriend Victoria Hervey reacted to the news and weirdly explained how if you're not involved in the Epstein files, it would be a bit of an insult.
Like if you were on the scene and you were powerful, like to be honest, like if you're not in those files, it would be an insult. Because it just means that you were a bit of a loser.
Right, so the people who aren't in the files are losers.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that clip kind of explains everything you need to know about the woman. Also reacting to the news was Emily Maitlis, who was the journalist who interviewed Andrew in 2019.
There is something very personal in this as well. And, you know, we talk a lot about people's sort of state of mind and health and all the rest of it. I suppose I feel concern actually as I'm watching this story unfold. And I suppose that two things can be simultaneously true, that it can have been a long time coming. It can have been, you know, one of the sort of texts I got this morning from a former colleague, just said, finally. You know, we, in one way, a lot of us have been expecting this to unfold. But when it does, there is somebody at the centre of it, and it is a father, and there are children, and there is a mental health question. And I suppose that's what's sort of holding me back a bit and saying this is a pretty serious moment. You know, it's a grave moment.
Talking about and having sympathy for the mental health of Andrew is honestly one of the craziest and dumbest things she could have brought up. What about the mental health of the victims in all of this? But the problem in all of this is you can't really trust anyone. A few days after Andrew's arrest, Peter Mandleson, who was Keir Starmer's ambassador to the US, was also arrested, but also denied allegations and was later released on bail just like Andrew. However, Emily Maitlis was reporting on it, and yet here she is at dinner with him. And granted, that photo is at a public awards dinner, but at surface level, it does create a tinfoil suspicion of wondering how far this web spins. Following the release of documents in February, there has been a massive public outcry for full transparency and calls for the release of the rest of the files, especially considering so far it's created more questions than given answers. Keir Starmer has also even suggested that Andrew should testify to the US Congress in a similar way the Clintons have. On the 13th of March 2026, a new photo of Peter Mandleson, Prince Andrew and Epstein was released to the public. The trio are pictured sitting around a wooden table in Martha's Vineyard, an island off the US state of Massachusetts, with both Andrew and Peter wearing bathrobes. Alongside this photo, we've also seen images of Andrew crawling over the still body of an unidentified woman, and learned that Epstein's jet had apparently made 90 flights to or from UK airports, including 15 after his 2008 conviction. Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown wrote an article urging police to re-examine files, as women were apparently transferred from one plane to another at Stansted Airport, meaning that, hypothetically, women arriving on private planes into Britain wouldn't need British visas. In recent weeks, both Fergie and Andrew have been booted from the Royal Lodge in Windsor. However, people have now also began questioning Princess Beatrice and Eugene, after it was revealed that they were also mentioned in the files. However, at the moment, they show no sign of wrongdoing. But saying that, people have also been calling for their titles to be removed and questioned over what they knew about their parents' connections to Epstein, which I think is pretty spot on. As King Charles allows the law to take its course, the monarchy itself faces a large amount of doubt over its future. But saying that, despite the mounting evidence, some pockets of royalists remain intensely defensive of the whole situation, with the Telegraph creating articles about benefits of hardworking royals despite bad apples, and the mental fans who go to their public events.
Charles, how long have you known about Andrew and Epstein?
Ultimately, the downfall of Prince Andrew is not just about a royal scandal, it's about the long overdue justice for survivors like Virginia Giuffre, who fought until her death to draw the battle lines against her abusers. The journey from being the golden child and Randy Andy to a disgraced royal arrested on his 66th birthday does offer some hope that one day we may see total justice. Anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate this wasn't the most uplifting video, but it was an important one. If you're new here, make sure to go follow me over on Instagram at @FatMemer, and while you're still here, like this video, subscribe, and comment below what you want to see next. As always, I'll see you in the next one.